Day 42. At least, I think it's 42. I lost count around the time the grandfather clock in the master hall stopped winding. It feels like it's been raining for a year. Not the clean, washing kind of rain. This is heavy, oily. It sticks to the windows like grease. I'm sitting in the observatory of the Blackwood estate. It's the highest point on the island. From here, on a clear day, you used to be able to see the ferry crossing from the mainland, cutting a white line through the blue water. But there haven't been any clear days, and there hasn't been a ferry in 6 weeks. Just the fog, a wall of gray cotton that starts at the edge of the dock and swallows the world whole. My name is Elias Thorne. I was, the winter watchman for Blackwood Island. It's a rock, really. 300 acres of pine, slate, and moss sitting about 12 miles off the coast of Washington state. There are 6 houses here. Mansions, really. The kind of places built by people who have so much money they need to put an ocean between them and the rest of humanity. My job was simple. Keep the pipes from freezing, run the generators once a week, chase off the gulls, and make sure the place looked perfect for when the owners came back in May. I wasn't supposed to be here this long. My shift rotation was 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. The supply boat, a rusted trawler named the Guiding Star, was scheduled to pick me up on November 14th. I packed my bag that morning. I locked the maintenance shed. I stood on the dock with my coffee, watching the horizon, waiting to see that familiar rust bucket break the fog line. I waited until the coffee turned to ice in the mug. I waited until the sun went down and the cold seeped through my boots and into my bones. It never came. I was annoyed. Mechanics break, captains get drunk, storms roll in. I figured the radio in the guard shack would squawk with an apology from the harbor master. "Sorry, Elias, radiator blew. Sit tight, buddy." So I went back to the shack, keyed the mic, and hailed the Coast Guard. Static. Not just dead air. It was heavy, wet, like the radio waves were drowning before they could reach me. I tried the emergency frequency. I tried the weather band. I even tried the encrypted channel the owners use for their private helicopter pilots. Nothing but a low, rhythmic thrumming sound. Thump, 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 like a heartbeat underwater. I didn't panic then. You don't panic on day 1. You drink a beer from the fridge, you reread an old paperback, and you tell yourself the atmospheric pressure is messing with the signal. But then the tide came in on day 3. That's when I knew the world had broken. The water wasn't blue, and it wasn't the churning gray of a storm. It was purple, a deep, bruised, violent violet swirling with this bioluminescent sludge that glowed faint neon in the dark. It smelled like copper and rotting lilies. I went down to the rocky beach to look at it, keeping my distance. There were fish washed up on the slate, thousands of them. Rockfish, salmon, crabs, but they weren't just dead. They were changed. Their scales had fused into hard, calcified plates. Some of them had extra fins or eyes where gills should be. I poked a salmon with a driftwood stick, and it burst open. No blood, just spores, clouds of shimmering pink dust that drifted up into the rain. I covered my mouth and ran back to the high ground. I haven't gone near the waterline since. So here I am, king of the castle. Since the supply boat vanished, I've moved out of the caretaker's shack. It was drafty and, frankly, too close to the sea. I moved into the main house, the Blackwood Manor. It belongs, or belonged, to the Sterling family. Tech money, or maybe pharmaceuticals. I never asked, and they never looked me in the eye long enough to tell me. It's a fortress of glass and timber suspended over the cliffs on the north side. It has solar arrays on the roof, a geothermal heating system, and a pantry stocked for a devastating apocalypse or a really decadent dinner party. I have spent the last month living a life I can't afford, wearing cashmere sweaters I found in the master closet because my work clothes smell like mildew. I drink wines that cost more than my annual salary, and yet I have never been more terrified in my life. The isolation is a physical weight. You don't realize how loud silence is until it's the only thing you hear for a month. My routine keeps me sane. I wake up at 0600, I check the solar battery levels. We're at 85% capacity, which is good. The overcast sky limits the charge, but since I'm only powering the fridge, the security system, and a few lights, I'm net positive. At 7 a.m., I do a perimeter check of the house. I check the windows. The storm shutters are rated for hurricanes, but I keep them lowered on the ground floor. I don't like looking out at the tree line. The trees here are old growth, Douglas firs and cedars that are 6 feet wide at the base. In the fog, they look like sentinels, watching. And sometimes I swear they move. I've been scavenging the other 5 houses on the island, treating them like resource depots. The Miller place, down by the cove, had a medical kit that rivals a small hospital. Antibiotics, painkillers, sutures, I took it all. The Vanderhoven estate on the ridge had a library. I took books on botany, marine biology, and engineering. The glass-walled monstrosity owned by the crypto kid, well, that place was useless. Empty fridge, no books, just massive TVs that don't work, and a garage full of electric cars with dead batteries. But it was in the 4th house, the Henderson cottage, that I found the first sign that I wasn't just dealing with a natural disaster. That was day 12. The Henderson place is old school, Victorian style, creepy as hell, lots of dark wood and velvet. I went in looking for lamp oil and matches. The front door was locked, deadbolted. I had the master key, of course. I let myself in, shaking the rain off my coat. The air inside was stale, cold. I went to the kitchen first. The dust on the counter was undisturbed. I was checking the cupboards when I saw it. On the dining room table, a dinner setting. 1 plate, 1 wine glass, a fork and knife placed perfectly parallel, and in the center of the plate was a portable radio, a handheld marine transceiver standing upright. It was on. The green power light was blinking. I hadn't been in this house in 3 weeks. The owners hadn't been here since August. Batteries don't last that long. Someone had turned it on recently. I froze. I pulled the heavy flashlight from my belt and swept the room. "Hello?" I called out. My voice cracked. It sounded too loud, too desperate. "I'm the caretaker, Elias. Is anyone here?" Silence. Just the house settling in the wind. I walked over to the table slowly. The radio was set to channel 16, the international distress frequency. I leaned in, putting my ear close to the speaker. It wasn't static. It was whispering, a human voice buried under layers of white noise. It was looping. "Don't breathe the dust. Locked the door. They look like us. Don't breathe the dust." I grabbed the radio. The casing was cold. I checked the battery compartment. There were no batteries inside. I dropped it. It clattered onto the hardwood floor, the battery cover popping off to show the empty slot. And yet, from the floor, the speaker kept whispering, "They look like us." I ran. I didn't take the oil. I didn't take the matches. I sprinted back through the rain, slipping on the wet pine needles, heart hammering against my ribs until I was back inside the Blackwood Manor with the heavy steel bolts thrown shut. I haven't gone back to the Henderson place. That was weeks ago. Since then, things have escalated. The fog has changed color. In the mornings, it's the usual gray, but around twilight, it turns a sickly yellow, and the smell comes with it. It smells like ozone and burnt hair. When that yellow fog rolls in, the birds stop screaming. The gulls, the crows, they just vanish. And then there are the sounds from the beach.
At night, when the tide is high, I hear scraping, heavy, wet scraping against the rocks below the cliff. It sounds like someone dragging a sack of wet cement over sandpaper. I tried to look once using the high-powered telescope in the observatory. I aimed it down at the cove. The moonlight was filtering through the clouds, lighting up the surf. I saw shapes, not people, too big to be people. They were moving in the surf, pulling themselves up onto the jagged rocks. They looked like clumps, tangled masses of kelp and driftwood, but they moved with purpose. They were hauling things. Crates? Bodies? I couldn't tell. I watched one of them stop and turn toward the house. It didn't have a face. It just had a smooth, wet surface where a head should be. It stood there for 10 minutes, perfectly still, facing up the cliff, facing me. I closed the shutters in the observatory that night. I haven't opened them since.
But today changed the equation. Around noon, the rain stopped. It was the first break in the weather in 10 days. The sky didn't clear, but the downpour ceased. I decided to check the perimeter fence. The Blackwood estate is surrounded by an 8-foot wrought iron fence with security spikes. It's mostly decorative, meant to keep deer out of the prize-winning hydrangeas, but right now it feels like a castle wall. I was walking the north line, checking for rust or fallen branches, when I found the breach. Section 4, near the old servants' entrance. The iron bars weren't cut. They weren't rusted through. They were bent. 2 1-inch thick solid iron bars were bent apart, creating a gap wide enough for a person or something larger to squeeze through. And on the spikes at the top of the fence, there was something snagged. I reached up with a stick and knocked it down. It fell into the mud with a wet slap. It was a piece of fabric, a sleeve, yellow, heavy-duty rubber, the kind fishermen wear. But the inside of the sleeve wasn't empty. It was coated in a thick, translucent slime, and stuck in the slime were teeth, small, serrated teeth like a shark's, embedded in the rubber lining. I stared at that sleeve for a long time. The gap in the fence led directly into the dense fern forest that buffers the main house from the cliffs. Something had come inside the perimeter, and based on the mud tracks leading away from the fence, it didn't leave. It headed toward the generator shed. I gripped my axe, a splitting maul I'd taken from the woodshed, and followed the tracks. My hands were sweating inside my gloves. Every snapped twig sounded like a gunshot. The tracks led to the generator outbuilding. The door was slightly ajar. I know I locked it. I check that lock every Tuesday. I pushed the door open with the head of the axe, ready to swing. The shed was empty. The diesel generator was humming away, perfectly normal. But on the floor, in the center of the room, someone had used a knife to carve something into the concrete. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a plea for help. It was a map, a crude, scratched map of the island. And right in the center, where the Blackwood Manor sits, they had scratched a single word, over and over again, so deep the concrete had crumbled. Below, below, below. I backed out of the shed. I relocked it, jamming a piece of rebar through the handle for good measure. I'm back in the library now. The sun is setting. The yellow fog is starting to curl against the windows. I have a problem. The map in the shed said below, but this house doesn't have a basement. I've worked here for 3 years. I have the blueprints in the office. It's built on a slab foundation anchored to the granite. There is no below. Except, I'm looking at the blueprints right now. I spread them out on the desk. There's a gap in the measurements. The hallway between the kitchen and the pantry is listed as being 12 feet long, but on the exterior schematic, that section of the house is 20 feet long.
There's an 8-foot void in the center of the house that isn't accounted for on the interior plans. And 10 minutes ago, while the house was quiet, I heard it, right beneath my feet. A mechanical click, then a hiss, like an airlock cycling. I'm sitting directly on top of something, and I think, after 42 days, someone just opened the door from the inside.
I have the axe, I have a flare gun, and I have to know what is under this floor. Because if I don't check it, I think whatever is down there is going to come up here. I stared at the floorboards for a long time. The hallway rug, an antique Persian runner that probably cost more than my truck, was slightly askew. I hadn't moved it. I'm careful. I clean my boots at the door. I don't drag my feet. Someone or something had shifted it, just an inch. I knelt down. The wood here is reclaimed teak, dark and hand-scraped. It's seamless, but when I ran my gloved fingertips along the grain, I felt it. A vibration, a low-frequency hum that traveled up through my knuckles and into my arm. The house wasn't just settling, it was working. I pulled the rug back. There was no handle, no keyhole, no recessed latch, just the wood. But looking closer, with the beam of my flashlight angled flat against the floor, I saw the cut, a hairline fracture in the varnish, forming a perfect rectangle, 3 feet by 3 feet. I remembered the blueprint gap, 8 feet of missing space. I stood up and went to the wall. The wainscoting was oak. I started pressing. I checked the sconces. I checked the light switches. It felt ridiculous, like I was in some bad spy movie. Just push the book and the bookcase spins. But rich people love their theatrics. They love feeling like they have secrets nobody else is smart enough to find. I found it behind the thermostat. The thermostat casing was loose. I pulled it away from the wall, expecting to see wires. Instead, there was a secondary panel, a keypad, not digital, mechanical, old school, heavy brass buttons numbered 1 through 9. I didn't have a code. I stood there, axe in one hand, staring at the brass buttons, feeling the sweat trickle down my back. I thought about the radio whispering on the table in the Henderson cottage, "Don't breathe the dust." Then I remembered the date etched on the cornerstone of the main gate, the date the Blackwood estate was founded, 1912. I punched it in, 1912. The floor didn't drop away, it rose. The section of the floor I had been standing near hissed and popped up about an inch, then slid smoothly, silently into a recess under the kitchen wall. It revealed a square of darkness. The smell hit me first. It didn't smell like a basement. Basements smell like damp earth and mildew. This smelled like ozone, like a hospital waiting room mixed with the distinct, sharp scent of rubbing alcohol and burning dust. I shined the light down. Steep concrete stairs, not wood, industrial gray concrete with yellow safety strips on the edges, handrails made of brushed steel. I gripped the axe tighter. "Hello?" I called down. My voice didn't echo. The walls down there must have been soundproofed. It just died in the dark. I descended. 1 step. 2. The air got colder instantly. The humidity of the storm above vanished, replaced by a dry, conditioned chill that made the sweat on my neck freeze. At the bottom of the stairs, about 12 feet down, there was a landing and a door, a blast door, heavy steel, painted cream to look less aggressive, but I know a blast door when I see one. It had a wheel handle, and it was cracked open, just a sliver, maybe 2 inches. I put my eye to the gap, darkness inside, but I could see the reflection of a blinking light, green, rhythmic, bouncing on a polished floor. I pushed the door. It was heavy, balanced on massive hinges, and it swung inward with a groan that sounded like a dying wail. I stepped inside. It wasn't a bunker.
A bunker implies huddled masses, cots, and cans of beans. This was a laboratory or a command center. The room was about 40 feet long. The walls were lined with monitors, dozens of them. Most were dark, but a few were cycling through static or no signal messages. In the center of the room was a large conference table made of glass, and on the far wall, windows. I walked over to them, confused. We were underground. What could windows possibly show? I realized they weren't windows. They were screens, high-definition panels meant to simulate a view. One was frozen on a loop of a sunny meadow in the Alps. The other was glitching, showing a distorted view of a tropical beach where the water was purple and the sky was black. I walked to the main console. Papers were scattered everywhere, not neatly stacked, thrown. Someone had left here in a hurry. I picked up a file folder. It was stamped with a logo I didn't recognize, Aegis Dynamics. Inside was a report. Subject, localized bioremediation failure. Date, October 14th. Location, Coastal Sector 4. October 14th. That was a full month before my shift started. A month before the world ended. They knew. I scanned the document. It was full of scientific jargon, protein folding, calcification rates, neurological override. But one paragraph stood out, circled in red ink. The vector is not strictly waterborne. At high tide, the particulate matter becomes airborne within 500 meters of the surf. Masks are ineffective after 4 hours of exposure. Cognitive decline begins at 12 hours. Mimicry begins at 24 hours. Mimicry. My blood ran cold. The voice on the radio. They look like us. I dropped the file. I needed to know if I was safe down here. I checked the perimeter monitors. Screen 4 was active. It showed the front gate, the breach in the fence where I found the rubber sleeve. The camera was high definition, night vision. I watched the screen. The ferns near the gate were moving, not from the wind. Something was pushing through them, low to the ground. Then I saw it, just for a second. A hand, pale, wet, grabbing the iron bar of the fence, but it had too many joints. The fingers were too long, bending in places fingers shouldn't bend. I looked away from the screen. I couldn't do anything about the outside right now. I had to clear the inside.
There was a hallway leading off the main command room. I followed it. The lights here were motion activated. They flickered on as I walked, illuminating doors. Storage 1, Storage 2, Medical, Quarters. I checked Storage 1 first. Food, pallets of it, freeze-dried steaks, wine, cases of water, medical supplies, enough to last years. But it had been ransacked. Crates were tipped over. Bags of rice were slashed open, spilling white grains across the floor like snow. Rat droppings? No, too big. Something had been eating in here. I moved to the medical bay. The door was locked, a red light on the panel. I peered through the small reinforced glass window. Inside there were 3 hospital beds. 2 were empty. The third one had the sheets pulled up over a shape. A body. I tried the handle. Locked. I raised the axe. The lock was electronic, but the frame was just aluminum. I swung the back of the axe head against the latch. Clang! Again. Clang! The door popped open. The smell in the medical bay was different. Rot. Sweet, cloying rot. I walked to the bed. My hand hovered over the sheet. I didn't want to look, but I'm the watchman. It's my job to check the rooms. It's my job to know what's on the island. I pulled the sheet back. It wasn't a Sterling. It wasn't one of the billionaires. It was a man in a maintenance uniform, a blue jumpsuit, just like mine. But the name tag said Rodriguez. Rodriguez was the guy before me. He did the summer shift. I was told he quit. I was told he took a job in Alaska. He was lying here. And he wasn't just dead. He was dissected. His chest was open, but not by a surgeon. His ribs were bent outward, like something had burst out of him, and his skin, it was hard, gray, like the scales on the fish I saw on the beach. I stumbled back, covering my mouth, fighting the urge to vomit. They didn't just know. They were testing it. They were using us. I turned to leave the room, to run back upstairs, weld the hatch shut, and take my chances with the storm. But then I heard it. A voice coming from the intercom on the wall. Identify. It wasn't a whisper. It was clear, sharp, a woman's voice. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from deeper in the facility. I stared at the speaker. "Who is that?" I shouted. "Where are you?" "Identify," the voice repeated. No emotion. "Security Protocol Delta. Intruder in Sector 1. Identify or neutralization gas will be deployed in 10 seconds. "I'm the caretaker," I yelled. "Elias Thorne. I work here." A pause, then the hiss of static. "Elias?" The voice changed. It sounded surprised, human. "Elias, don't move. Do not leave that room. If you step back into the hallway, the sentry gun will cut you in half." "Who are you?" I asked, looking frantically at the hallway ceiling. I saw it now, a black dome camera and a sleek gunmetal turret hanging from a recessed track. It was tracking me. The red laser dot was center mass on my chest. "My name is Dr. Elias Thorne," she said. I froze. Thorne. My last name. But I don't have any family. I was an orphan, foster system kid. I don't have a sister. I don't have a wife. "I don't know you," I said. "No, you wouldn't. But you need to listen to me very carefully. The thing that came through the fence, it's inside the house upstairs. I just watched it break the kitchen window." I looked up at the ceiling of the bunker. I could hear it, scrabbling like a massive crab on the kitchen tile. It was right above the hatch. "The hatch is open," I whispered. "I know, and you can't close it from down here. The hydraulics are manual override only from the top side." "Then I'm trapped." "No," she said. "You're bait. Now run. Get to the airlock at the end of the hall. I'm opening it now." The laser on my chest turned off. At the far end of the corridor, past the ransacked storage room, a heavy circular door began to spin. I didn't wait. I heard the shriek from the top of the stairs, a sound like tearing metal and a crying child mashed together. I sprinted. I ran past the storage room. I heard the thing hit the landing behind me. It hissed. I risked a glance back. In the flickering light of the hallway, I saw it. It was wearing the yellow rubber sleeve, but the rest of it, it looked like a man made of wet clay and broken glass. Its limbs were too long. It was crawling on all fours, scrambling on the walls, not the floor. And it had a face. It had my face, a perfect copy of me staring back with dead white eyes. "Move, Elias!" the woman screamed over the intercom. I dove through the circular door just as it started to close. I rolled onto the floor. Clang! The door sealed. I heard a heavy thud against the metal from the other side. Then scratching, frantic, high-pitched scratching. I lay there on the floor, gasping for air, clutching the axe like a lifeline. I was in a new room, clean, white, and standing over me was a woman in a white lab coat holding a tablet. She looked tired, she looked scared, and she looked exactly like me. Same eyes, same nose, same scar on the chin. She looked down at me and didn't offer a hand. "Welcome to the Deep Archive, Subject 7. We have a lot of work to do." I looked at her. I looked at the name tag on her coat. Dr. A. Thorne. "Subject 7? I wheezed. "I'm the Watchman." She crouched down, meeting my eyes. "You were never the Watchman, Elias. You were the control group, and you're the only one who lasted this long." Control group. The words hung in the cold air between us like breath on glass. I gripped the handle of my axe so hard my knuckles turned white. My other hand was still trembling. I wanted to stand up, to tower over her, to demand answers, but my legs felt like water. "What does that mean?" I asked. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "I'm not a subject. I grew up in Seattle. I went to Garfield High. I have a social security number. I have memories." Dr. Elias Thorne didn't blink. She tapped the screen of her tablet, scrolling through data streams I couldn't read. "Implanted," she said. She didn't say it with cruelty. She said it like she was reading the weather report. "The hippocampus is remarkably pliable. You have memories of a first bike ride? A red Schwinn? You scraped your knee?" I froze. I did. I had a scar on my left knee to prove it. "Standard memory set B4, she said, finally looking up. Her eyes were terrified, red-rimmed from lack of sleep, but her voice remained clinical, a shield. "We needed to test how the Subject 7 genome responded to stress in a naturalistic environment. The caretaker position wasn't a job, Elias. It was a habitat. The island was your cage." Thud. The blast door buckled slightly. The mimic, the thing with my face wearing the yellow raincoat, was getting stronger. "We don't have time for an existential crisis," Eris snapped, extending a hand. "That door is rated for 5 kilotons of force, but the creature out there knows the override codes, because it has your memories too." I stared at her hand. It was identical to mine. Same shape, same long fingers. Even the fingernails were shaped the same way. I didn't take her hand. I pushed myself up using the wall. "You explain everything," I said, pointing the axe at her, "or I open that door and let us both take our chances." She looked at the door, then back at me. She saw I wasn't bluffing. "Fine," she said. "Walk, I'll talk." We moved deeper into the facility. This section was different. The polished white tiles of the upper lab gave way to industrial grading. We were walking over a void. Beneath us, I could hear rushing water, the ocean. We were under the sea level now. "The bloom," Eris began, walking briskly. "It isn't a virus, not in the traditional sense. It's a primordial biological agent. We found it 10 years ago in a thermal vent 3 miles off the coast. The Aegis Corporation thought it was the key to cellular regeneration, immortality for the highest bidder." "The billionaires," I muttered. "Yes, the Sterlings, the Hendersons. They funded the extraction. But the agent, it doesn't just heal, it assimilates. It seeks biomass. It repurposes it. It learns." She stopped at a heavy bulkhead door and began typing a code. The hiss. The door opened. We stepped onto a catwalk. The room was massive, cylindrical. It looked like the inside of a silo, and lining the walls, stacked 5 high, were glass tanks filled with amber liquid. I stopped walking. The axe slipped from my hand and clattered onto the grating. Clang, clang, clang. Inside the tanks were bodies. Men. All of them around 30 years old. All of them with dark hair. All of them. Me. "Subjects 1 through 6, Eris whispered. I walked to the nearest tank. Subject 4. He was floating in suspension, a breathing mask over his face. But his skin was wrong. It was translucent. I could see the veins, black and pulsing. One of his arms was atrophied, a withered twig. Subject 5 in the tank next to him was worse. He had no eyes, just smooth skin where the sockets should be. "They didn't survive the bonding process," Eris said quietly. She stood beside me, looking at the tanks with a mix of revulsion and grief. "Genetic rejection. The bloom tore them apart from the inside. But you, Subject 7. She turned to me. "You were the success. You didn't reject the splice. You integrated it. That's why you haven't turned. You've been breathing the spores for 42 days, Elias. The yellow fog? That's pure contagion. Anyone else would have been a walking fungus within an hour. You just got a headache." I looked at my hands. They looked normal, but beneath the skin I felt heavy. "So I'm what?" I asked, my voice trembling. "A monster? Like the thing outside?" "No, the thing outside is what happens when the bloom takes a host that isn't immune. That mimic? It was a recovery team member, sent to retrieve you 2 weeks ago. He got infected. He absorbed your biometric data from the security system. He thinks he's you, but he's just a hollow shell full of rage. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. You are the cure, Elias. Your blood. If we can get you to the extraction point, we can synthesize a vaccine. We can stop the coast from turning into a graveyard.
Sector 4? Eris went pale. That's the cooling intake. What does that mean? It means the mimic didn't just try to beat the door down, she said, pulling me toward the elevator at the end of the catwalk. It destroyed the intake valves. It's flooding the facility. It's trying to flush us out. We ran for the elevator. The sound of water was louder now, a roar beneath us. I looked down through the grating. The dark water was rising, swirling with that same purple bioluminescence I saw on the beach. And in the water, shapes were moving. Fast. Eels? Sharks? No. They were limbs. Detached swimming limbs. We hit the elevator button. Nothing happened. Power rerouted to drainage pumps, Eris cursed. She pried the panel open and started hot wiring the circuit. Eris, I said, I needed to know one more thing. If I'm Subject 7, who are you? Why do you look like me? She didn't look up from the wires. Sparks flew. I'm not the clone, Elias. You are. You're a male clone of me, modified for physical resilience. We share 99.8% of our DNA. She connected 2 wires. The elevator jerked to life. The doors slid open. I'm your sister, she said, her voice cracking. In every way that matters. I created you to save the world, but I didn't want you to die. We stepped inside. She hit the button for level -5, the incinerator. The elevator descended. -2, -3. The lights in the car flickered. Why the incinerator? I asked. I thought we were escaping. Eris slumped against the wall of the elevator. She looked exhausted. She pulled her sleeve up. I saw it. On her forearm. A patch of skin about the size of a coin. It was gray, hard, calcified. And in the center of it, a tiny purple flower was blooming, pushing through her flesh. I'm not immune, Elias. I've been down here for a month, trying to keep the containment fields up, but the air filtration failed 3 days ago. I'm turning, Elias. My stomach dropped. No, we can fix it. My blood, right? You said I'm the cure. She shook her head. A sad smile played on her lips. It works as a vaccine, not a reversal agent. Once the bloom takes root, it fuses with the nervous system. If I leave this island, I become a carrier. I become one of them. She reached into her lab coat and pulled out a key card. It was heavy, black metal. The incinerator is the only way to destroy the source sample, the mother sample we pulled from the trench. It's growing in the sub-basement. If the facility floods, the mother sample will wash out into the open ocean. If that happens, the Pacific is dead. The world is dead. She pressed the keycard into my hand. You have to trigger the thermal overload, burn the facility, burn the island, and then take the submersible in the emergency bay. It's pre-programmed for a secure Aegis outpost in Oregon. I'm not leaving you, I said. The memory of a sister I never had was suddenly replaced by the reality of the sister standing in front of me, the only person on Earth who knew what I was. You don't have a choice, she said. We stopped between floors. They cut the cables, I whispered. Above us, on the roof of the elevator car, we heard it. Thump. Heavy. Wet. Scrape. The mimic. It's on the roof, Eris hissed. She pulled a pistol from her waistband, a small security sidearm, and aimed it at the ceiling. The roof of the elevator began to dent inward. The metal groaned, stretching like taffy. It's not just strong, it's corrosive. A drop of yellow slime dripped through the seam in the ceiling panels. It hit the floor and sizzled, eating through the carpet. The hatch, Eris shouted. Boost me up. What? You'll be right next to it. The maintenance hatch. We can climb out into the shaft. There's a ladder to level -5. Do it, Elias. I cupped my hands. She stepped into them, and I launched her upward. She slammed the emergency latch on the ceiling panel open with the butt of the gun. The panel swung open. She didn't climb out. She fired. Bang! 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 A scream echoed down the shaft. Not human. It sounded like a whale singing in agony. Yellow sludge poured down through the opening. splashing onto my shoulder. It burned, like acid. I gritted my teeth, suppressing a scream. "Go!" she yelled, reaching a hand down. I jumped, grabbing the rim of the hatch. She hauled me up. We were on top of the elevator car, in the dark shaft. The mimic was there. It was clinging to the cables 10 feet above us, glowing faintly in the dark. Its jaw unhinged, revealing rows of needle teeth. It wore my face, but the eyes were gone, replaced by blooming purple clusters. "Hello, Elias," it mimicked, my voice, perfect pitch. "Time to wake up." It lunged. Eris fired the last 3 rounds. 2 hit the creature in the chest, blowing chunks of gray matter into the darkness. It didn't slow down. It tackled me. We slammed onto the metal roof of the car. The smell was overpowering, rotting kelp and chemical fire. Its hands, my hands, wrapped around my throat. "We are the same," it whispered, drooling slime onto my face. "Why fight? The water is warm." I couldn't breathe. My vision spotted. I reached for my axe, but I had dropped it on the catwalk. I flailed, my hand hitting the tool belt I was still wearing. The flare gun. I still had the flare gun. I ripped it from the holster. I didn't aim. I just jammed the barrel into the creature's ribs, right where the heart should be, and I pulled the trigger. Whoosh! The flare didn't just burn. Inside the creature's body, the magnesium reacted with the methane in its cells. The creature didn't scream. It exploded. Not a fiery explosion, but a rapid expansion of boiling gas and blackened flesh. It was blasted backward, off the elevator car, plummeting down the shaft into the black water rising below. I rolled over, coughing, wiping the slime from my eyes. "Eris?" She was slumped against the cables. She was holding her side. The creature had swiped her. 3 deep gashes across her abdomen. The blood wasn't red, it was purple. "I'm okay," she lied. She tried to stand, but slipped. "We have to move," I said, grabbing her. "The water is rising." I looked down the shaft. The water level was only 20 feet below us now, and climbing fast. I grabbed the service ladder on the wall. "Climb," I told her. We scrambled down the ladder, racing the rising tide, toward the service door for level -5. We reached the door just as the water lapped at our boots. I spun the wheel, shoved the door open, and we fell inside. I slammed it shut and spun the lock just as the water hit the other side with the force of a battering ram. We were in the core, the incinerator room. It wasn't a furnace, it was a reactor. In the center of the room, suspended in a magnetic field behind blast glass, was the source, the mother sample. It was beautiful and terrifying, a pulsating sphere of purple and black biomass about the size of a car. It had veins that reached out into the air, twitching. It looked like a heart that beat for a dead world. Eris leaned against the console, her breathing shallow. The purple stain on her shirt was spreading. "The override," she wheezed, pointing to a terminal on the far side of the room. "Code 7 Alpha." I ran to the terminal. I entered the code. Access granted. Warning: thermal sterilization will result in total structural collapse. "Do it," she whispered. I hovered my finger over the enter key, but then the screen changed. A new window popped up. A video file. Autoplay. It was dated 20 years ago. The face on the screen wasn't Eris. It was an older man, stern, cold eyes. Martin Blackwood, the original owner of the island. "If you are seeing this," the recording said, "then Project Aegis has failed. But do not destroy the sample. The sample is the only thing keeping him alive." I froze. "Him?" I asked aloud. The camera on the video panned. It showed a hospital bed, and in the bed was a boy, a child, maybe 10 years old. He was hooked up to machines. He was dying, but I knew that face. It was me, not a clone. Me. The recording continued. "My son, Elias Blackwood, died of leukemia in 2005. The sample brought him back, but it requires proximity. If the sample is destroyed, Elias dies. I stepped back from the console. I looked at Eris. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the floor, tears streaming down her face. "You lied," I said. My voice broke. "I'm not a clone. I'm not a subject." "No," she whispered. "You're the original, Elias. You died 20 years ago. The bloom, it's not just infecting the island. It's animating you. It's the only thing keeping your heart beating." I looked at my hands. I looked at the reactor. If I destroy the facility, I destroy the virus, but I also destroy myself. I stood between the button that would save the world and the truth that I was already a monster. "Eris," I said, "if I push this button, you turn to dust," she choked out. "The bond breaks. You just stop. And if I don't, then the bloom spreads, the mimicry takes over. Everyone becomes like the thing in the shaft, but you get to live. You get to be the king of a dead world." I looked at the red button. I looked at the monster in the tank. I looked at my sister. And then the glass of the reactor room began to crack. The crack in the glass wasn't just a physical break. It was a breach in the world. Through the spiderweb fracture, the mother sample pulsed. It knew I was there. It didn't have eyes, but I could feel its gaze on me. It felt heavy, like a warm blanket you can't kick off. It felt loving. That was the horror of it. It didn't want to eat me. It wanted to hold me. It was calling out to the pieces of itself that were stitched into my DNA. "Come home," it seemed to hum. "The water is warm. The pain is gone. No more loneliness. No more rain." I took a step toward the glass. My hand raised involuntarily. My fingertips brushed the cold surface. The purple veins in the sample surged, pressing against the other side, matching my handprint. "Elias!" Eris screamed. She was on the floor, clutching the console. Blood, purple blood, seeping through her fingers. "Don't listen to it! It's a hive mind! If you join it, you disappear!" I blinked, shaking the fog from my head. I looked at my hand. The skin on my palm was rippling. Under the surface, something was moving. "I'm already part of it, Eris," I said, my voice hollow. "I'm not real. I'm just a spore print in the shape of a dead boy." "You are real!" she shouted, coughing wetly. "You made coffee this morning. You fixed the generator. You saved me from the elevator. The bloom mimics biology, Elias. It doesn't mimic conscience. That's you. That's all you." Crack! A shard of glass the size of a dinner plate popped out of the containment wall and shattered on the floor. Purple gas hissed into the room. The air grew thick, sweet, intoxicating. "The integrity is at 10%, Eris wheezed. "If that glass fails before the incinerator fires, the thermal flash won't contain it. The pressure wave will blow the spores out into the atmosphere. You have to push the button, now!" I looked at the red button, thermal sterilization. If I pushed it, the facility would heat to 4,000 degrees in 3 seconds. I would vaporize. The bloom inside me would die instantly. I would die. Again. But if I didn't, I could walk out of here. I could let the glass break. I could let the mother sample embrace me. I could become the king of Blackwood Island. I could live forever in the fog. I looked at Eris. She was fading. The gray calcification was spreading up her neck, turning her skin to stone. She was dying to stop this. I realized then that being human isn't about DNA. It isn't about where you were born or if you were grown in a tank. Being human is about what you are willing to give up. I turned back to the console. "Goodbye, Elias," I whispered to the reflection in the glass, the reflection of the boy who died 20 years ago. I slammed my fist onto the red button. "Sequence initiated. Detonation in T-2 minutes." 2 minutes. The reactor flared white. The heat was instant. The paint on the walls began to blister. Eris slipped against the console, a small, sad smile on her face. "You did it." "We're not done," I said. I grabbed her. "Elias, leave me! You can't escape! The heat!" I'm not trying to escape, I said, hoisting her arm over my shoulder, but the data can. I dragged her toward the emergency airlock on the far side of the core. The heat was already unbearable. My maintenance jacket was smoking. We stumbled into the small launch bay. There was no submersible here, just a black box ejection pod, a reinforced titanium sphere meant to survive the destruction of the facility and float to the surface with the research logs. It was small, just big enough for a hard drive, or a very small person. It's too small for us, I said, looking at the sphere. Eris leaned against the wall, sliding down. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the hard drive she'd taken from the main lab. The drive with the cure research, the drive with the truth about Aegis. Put it in, she whispered. The world needs to know. I took the drive. I placed it in the sphere. But then I looked at Eris. She was shivering. The infection was taking her mind now. Her eyes were unfocused. I'm scared, Elias, she said. Her voice was small, like a little girl's. I don't want to burn. I knelt beside her. The room was shaking. The roar of the reactor was so loud I had to yell. You won't burn, I said. I picked her up. She was light. The sickness had eaten her away. I put her inside the sphere. Elias, no, it's for data. I won't fit. Curl up like you're sleeping. She curled her knees to her chest. She fit, barely. The pod is cryo-insulated, I told her. It will freeze you instantly. It will stop the infection from progressing. When Aegis finds the pod, or the Coast Guard, they'll have the research. They can cure you. But you... She reached a hand out. Her fingers were gray and cold. I took her hand. My hand was warm, burning hot. I have to stay, I said. Someone has to make sure the fire burns everything. I keyed the launch sequence. The glass lid of the sphere hissed shut. I saw her mouth my name one last time. Then, with a pneumatic thump, the pod was ejected into the dark water outside the facility. I watched the pressure gauge go to 0. She was away.
I walked back into the core. The heat was incredible. The soles of my boots were melting, sticking to the grating with every step. The glass containment wall had finally shattered. The mother sample was loose. It spilled out of the reactor like a landslide of purple sludge. It rose up, towering over me. A wave of biomass, eyes and mouths. It screamed at me, a psychic scream of betrayal. Why? 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 I walked right up to it. I could feel my skin cracking, not from the heat, but from the bond breaking. I raised my arms. Because, I said to the monster, I'm not your son. The countdown timer hit 0. There was no pain. I expected burning. I expected agony. But when the white light overtook me, it just felt clean. It felt like the sun coming out after 42 days of rain. It felt like the fog lifting. I saw the island in my mind, the trees burning, the mansion collapsing into the sea, the yellow fog burning away, replaced by smoke. I saw the ferry crossing the water. I saw a boy on a red bike. And then I saw nothing.